Hey, what's up, boys? So we just finished another really long stream, 15 hours today. It was 19 hours yesterday, but I'm supposed to be racing to 100. I'm like somewhere in like the bottom 20 at the moment in the world. I mean, I'm doing pretty well, but I came across some really interesting stuff while leveling that I really wanted to share with you guys. So that's what we're doing now. We're going over two variations of the Whirlwind builds that I've been playing while leveling that feel really, really powerful and are new because they rely on powers that we get from the Malignant Hearts. Now, the first one I want to start with is the one that you're seeing on screen now, and this is like a full CC bleed Barbarian. Where it excels, right now it feels to me like it does excellent damage. It does fantastic on bosses. It hard CCs them very, very quickly. And it's an incredibly good, I'd say, push build. I get the feeling from it. It's doing a ton of CC. It keeps enemies like perma-slowed, perma-stunned, even feared. They're basically just running around not knowing what to do and taking a ton of damage while that's happening. Now, the weak points are it's damage over time. So sometimes tougher enemies can take a moment to die. And also, it's not the fastest in the world because you don't get to choose your boots, so you lose a lot of movement speed there. But let's go into the build itself in game, and I'll show you exactly what it is that's making all of this work together. Starting things off, the whole core of the build is around Caged Heart of Creeping Death. This is one of the new Malignant Hearts. These are the wrathful ones. They're quite hard to get, but if you are looking for these, there are a lot of guides on how to farm them. I'd check one of those out from another creator. There's quite a few that I watched. I can't remember who by, but very, very useful information. Make sure you go and seek that out. But these are very, very powerful and can go into any socketed piece of jewelry, right? You don't have to worry about the color, so you can just pop it in, no problem. And you can see here the effect is that your damage over time is increased by 42.5% multiplicatively for each different crowd control effect that a target is under. Now, unstoppable enemies and staggered bosses instead take a flat 133% increased damage. Bosses, by the way, are not by default unstoppable, so until you stagger them, you don't get any benefit from it. That's worth knowing, but we do stagger them very, very quickly. So obviously, we're trying to apply as much CC to enemies as humanly possible, and the way that we're doing that is through some pretty nice use of uniques, which is something we don't get to do very often on a Barbarian. The first is Penitent Greaves. Now, these have a chill that applies to any enemy that you walk through. Fantastic, right? So this is obviously a very, very good start. Boom, perma chill. Not only that, we also have 7%, well, up to 10% multiplicative damage applied to those chilled enemies as well, which is really, really good. Like I said, we don't get to choose the stats on this one, so we don't get like movement speed on elite kill, and that's why I said it's a little bit slower. Next is our weapons. Now, we will be using dual one-handed weapons, and I'll explain why. First is the Butcher's Cleaver. This is a slashing weapon, which will be important for bleeding. And it also applies a fear and a slow. So we've already got chill, fear, and slow. Next, we're going to be using a one-handed mace. Any one-handed mace whatsoever. And the reason for that is, if we go into the skill tree here, is that if we're using a mace, we can actually use concussion to apply a stun to enemies. Now, in combination with this, I like to actually use Aspect of Anemia, either on the gloves or, on the helmet, wherever you can put them. And that will give us basically exactly the same effect again, so we have twice as much chance to stun enemies, because it can be a little bit difficult with just concussion alone. And that will give us a grand total of, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and including our taunt, which is also a CC, 5 stuns for... well, I mean, look, well, like 200% multiplicative increased bleed damage. Absolutely insane. Now, where are we getting the bleeds from? Well, we're getting the bleeds from a number of places. And first of all, it's going to be Furious Whirlwind. Now, this is the build for another Whirlwind spec that I'm using, but I will include a link again, like I said, to this entire build in the description for you to check. But we would have Furious Whirlwind that applies bleeds. This is why we have to use a slashing weapon. And we'll also, what will be different on this tree here is we'll be using No Mercy, because we will have a stun or a slow on the enemies most of the time with this particular build for even extra crit. If you're wondering where to get those points from, you just take 3 out of heavy-handed and put them in there. Easy peasy. Other than that, it's a pretty generic build. As for the Paragon, again, nothing really too exciting here. This is a bog standard Paragon board from before that I've always used in my builds. Again, a lot to be solved here. However, this has worked very, very well for me up until now. And again, if you want to have a look at this, check out the build planner in the description. As for technique, I'm not too sure, but I feel like perhaps sword expertise is actually best here. However, you know, axe expertise is always good because you get a lot of vulnerable damage from this as well. Again, not too sure on the math on that one, but both felt really, really good in the use. And as for stat prioritization, this is kind of a pretty interesting one. You didn't really have to go for the old, you know, tried and true crit, vulnerable, core strength. You could go for things like damage to stunned, damage to CC, damage to slowed, a bunch of other things that you couldn't usually go for. Damage to bleeding, damage over time. All of the damage over time was scaling very high. So you had a much broader scope of gear that you could go. And if you're wondering, well, why aren't you currently using it? You know, you're clearly using another build here. Well, I just couldn't figure it all out perfectly. And because I'm in the race, believe it or not, despite making this video, I'm still in the race. You know, I didn't have the time to sit there and really get into the nitty gritty of it, but it worked very, very well. I'm still collecting pieces, as you can see, to make it work a little bit later on. So I think this will be an excellent build for pushing. Now, so you may be wondering then, okay, what is the build that you're using? And it's basically just the old speed farming mace build, but with some small tweaks that have made it very good for this season, utilizing some of the new stuff. Now, I'm going to quickly let you see some gameplay while I just talk over the strengths. And the strengths are incredible direct damage. It just absolutely blasts things to smithereens. You can kill huge packs very quickly. You can also basically detonate bosses in one hit and just destroy them straight away. And as for weaknesses, so far none. I honestly don't think it has any. It's a bit harder to gear for, if you could call that a weakness. And you know, other than that, yeah, it feels basically the same. Maybe it lacks as much CC as the other build, but this was one of the better builds, or if not the best Whirlwind build from before, and I don't think that that's changed now. But again, I think that other build has a chance. It just needs to be sort of built out a little bit more. But let's talk about what's different about this build versus what we had previously in season or pre-season 0. And first, we'll take a look at the skill trees. There are a few changes here. Now, we use Violent Whirlwind. We have 5 points in Rally and Cry at the moment. Usually I wouldn't have these here, but for now I do because I don't have the resource generation. We have 3 for 3 in Imposing Presence and Martial Figure to try and make up for some of that lack of tankiness due to the nerfs. We still have all of the same stuff here in the Brawling passives. Then over to here, we actually have 2 in Defensive stance and 3 in Counter Offensive. Now, if you're wondering where these points have come from, they would have otherwise have been in No Mercy and in Hamstring, but we're not going any bleed whatsoever. So no bleed damage reduction or damage over time or damage to bleeding enemies in our gear either. That's why it's a little bit harder to gear for. And then everything else, pretty much standard mace build stuff. And again, you know, links down in the description below. And then as for gear, the things that make this so goddamn powerful are not just from the build's native power and also my pretty good gear, but we have this here. We have the Wrathful Heart of the Barber. This thing is absolutely insane. So this has the ability of soaking up all of the damage you do to an enemy after a crit and then blowing it up as a huge AoE to everything, everything around them. And that is crazy. Like, the effects you get from this can just clear entire rooms. And then, you know, when you add to this also things like we've got the Fisher's Heart of the Tempted Fate, which gives us huge crit damage. We also got the Brutal Heart here of this one's called Revenge, which I think is a damage reduction thing. I don't know. It says 18.5% damage is suppressed. If you guys know what exactly that means, let me know, because I would love to. I'm using it under the assumption that it means damage reduction, but I might be completely wrong. But yeah, we're just going in, we're smacking an enemy and then causing them to detonate for absolutely gigantic amounts of damage. And it's just caused for some very funny interactions where you just literally domino effect an entire room where you just blow one up and then it blows everything else up in the room. Feels really good. And then bosses, again, like they look like they're taking no damage and then they just get deleted, which is a really funny thing to see. But this is a really fun build. Been having a lot of fun with this. This will be what I take all the way to level 100 and probably start my speed farming with, so that I can start get ready for Lilith and stuff like that. But I will be definitely keeping my eye on that CC build as well. I would love to know what you guys think of them. Is there anything that I've missed? Anything you think either of these builds could use? And or, you know, anything along those lines at all. And you could also come by and check out the stream if you like. I'm going to go to bed. It's been far too long since I last had any sleep. But yeah, if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a like. Also consider subscribing and hey, check out the stream maybe. See you in there. Take care. Bye.